Hey guys, Jacqueline here with Zenith Home Loans. Thank you so much for joining us for another one of our Q&A sessions with some of my clients. Today we have kind of a different approach to this interview series with my client, TJ Haggerty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to kind of go through some of these questions. So TJ is going to talk to us a little bit about his career and what he's doing, and then kind of the path that led us there. So why don't you just start with kind of touching base on what exactly it is that you do for a living and kind of how you got there, and we'll start there.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. So I originally started off working at a startup, and we were a tech startup and based out of Colorado, but we ended up in New York City and San Francisco. We created, so we compressed images and we developed our own camera technology so that way it would take pictures of parking spots, and they were very compressed files so that way we can have multiple throughout a day, and it would just show like if a parking spot was filled or if a parking spot was not filled. And it started off at the University of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
We got some venture capitalist money and like some angel investors interested, and then we ended up getting funded, and that was pretty exciting. That's how I ended up in this accelerator program out in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the operations side of things. So we had 3 contracts. One was with Jefferson County, one was with the University of Colorado, and then one was, who was the third person? It was a shopping center out in Colorado Springs. And so I stayed mainly in Colorado, and I, like I said, I ran the operations, managed the relationships, stuff like that. So that's what got me into maybe going in the path of supply chain, because I was sourcing the material, I was building our camera units, I was working with the team to write the code to make sure that like our cameras were talking with the cloud and sharing the pictures with the cloud, so that way we were able to update our app and say, hey, there's parking spots here, there's no parking spots here, this lot's full, this one's not. Analyze the data and like say, make recommendations to our clients and say, you should look at investing more money in building a parking garage here versus here. There's less utilization over there.
Okay.
And then completed my undergrad in international business and a minor in mechanical engineering. And then I was talking to the director of supply chain at Keysight Technologies, and she was interested in my experience. And she one day said, I have a job opening coming up and you should consider it. It's for this commodity management position. So I started off in mechanicals, and you start off at Keysight and it's probably more like a buyer role. It's not what I would consider like a full commodity management role. A full commodity manager will manage like the architecting of a supply chain, but then they'll also act as like a pseudo materials engineer and work with R&D to help mesh their dreams and what they would like built with the supplier's capabilities and what they can actually build. And then they'll also manage like the negotiations and the contracts around that supplier engagement. And so I encompass more of the full commodity management role at this stage. So I started off in mechanicals, then I moved to electrical commodities, and now I'm taking over printed circuit boards and printed circuit assemblies. And, I would say my operations background helped me learn how to think through the problems. Just like you can't accept no for an answer, and you got to move quick. We were a startup, everyone was doing all these jobs, and, some days you're underwater and some days you're making it through. So it kind of set me up great for the MPI environment. So I work with new products or new product introductions, which are MPIs. And we develop prototype oscilloscopes. But on top of that, we also develop like test and measurement equipment and some other breakthrough technologies. Like we are going to be launching, I think, some of the first quantum computing modules that will connect to our oscilloscopes and help push them into like the first realm of like quantum computing processing speed. We're not like full qubit quantum computers yet, but we're a solution to help boost performance.
Okay.
And then, we're breaking into like 5G, 6G, stuff like that. So my team, I work on architecting the supply chain for the different parts and components that go inside of our oscilloscopes.
Okay. Cool. And so with your initial educational background, so you said international business and mechanical engineering, what was your plan? Like what kind of world? Because I feel like everybody like going into school, you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I end up studying. And then you start doing something completely different. So did you have a career path in mind with those two lines of study that's different than, because I assume you're not necessarily using the international business side of things, business education, obviously, with what you're doing, but what was your initial plan or kind of thought process with, okay, with these degrees, this is what I think I want to get into?
Yeah, that was pretty organic. I mean, I am an international role. So I like for the printed circuit boards, printed circuit assemblies, all that happens over in China and Malaysia. And
Right.
so, we're an international company. So when I first started off in mechanicals, I was working with people in Europe, and now I'm working with, it's like split between Europe and a lot of Asia with the electronic components. It's the main area that they come out of. The plan, I love business, and I've always known that I was a businessman. That started from probably the family businesses. My grandma owned a couple construction companies and a garbage company, like a waste management equivalent out in Montana. And so as a little kid, I got a lot of exposure to the family businesses, and always knew that I love business more than engineering. And that is what directed me more towards supply chain, because you have to have a fairly strong technical understanding of what the engineers are trying to accomplish, or what the team is trying to accomplish, because if you can't communicate like the technical requirements to your supplier, or work through problems, like over time, you'll find projects take a while. That could take like 5 years. So you'll have like obsolescence is a big thing, where you'll start off designing a product or a part, and then 5 years down the road, it's been obsoleted, but you're so committed to it that you can't get rid of it.
Right.
And so that sounded like really interesting to me. Having the operation side of things and the supply chain side of things at the startup, and then keeping in that vein, just going through the interview and hearing what the engineers had to say that like you'd be doing in the role. It just was appealing. I think I remember sitting in one supply chain course, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. It kind of melds the two. It's more business focused, but you still need the technical component to be successful in the role. So no real plan other than a strong direction of like, I want to get through school. I want to get into the industry. I love business, and kind of whatever comes around me as time goes on, I'll take it.
And so I know you just graduated, and so what was that for? Was it a graduate degree, master's degree?
Yeah, so I just received my MBA, and it was a professional MBA, so just one geared towards professionals working full time and going to school full time. And I did have a focus on supply chain, like new product introduction. Our final project was centered around picking a new product, developing it, and bringing it to market for a supplier over in Spain.
Okay. And then with the role that you're in currently, do you feel like more education is helping you kind of be more successful in your role? Like, do you feel like it was really important for you to have those additional backgrounds, or was there a piece missing that caused you to go, hey, I think I want to go back and get my MBA? So I feel like a lot of conversations happen. I've even thought about it before. It's like, hey, maybe I should go get my MBA. I don't have a good reason behind it other than it's been a really long time since I was in school. I feel like maybe a little bit more education wouldn't be the worst thing in the role, but I don't think for me personally in my role, it's not really going to change what it is that I'm doing. So with that MBA that you've gotten, what do you feel like that's changed for your role and your level of expertise, and maybe even like any additional growth opportunities in the future for you?
Sure. So me picking my MBA was definitely a personal choice. It was something that I wanted to pursue, and so I went with it. The first thing I'd say about picking an MBA is do your due diligence on like the classes that are included in the MBA. The one letdown that I kind of had was that mine were very high level. They were all operating like think like a CEO, and here's how a CEO would operate, and here's how to be an effective leader at this level. But at my level, I'm looking at first level management opportunities and leading, like being like a team lead. And so you could take some of the learnings or the methodologies or like how they would break problems apart, but it was sometimes hard to relate it back to your role because it was so high up.
Yeah.
The MBA, I can't say really does anything phenomenal for my career in my current role. It's not like I took any one class and was like, wow, because I took this 3-month finance class, I can now move into this new position and change industry. That really was not, in my opinion, that's really not the case with an MBA. My company it's heavily engineering focused. So if you're not an engineer, you need to have a really strong understanding in whatever area you're in. So that did lead to thinking, okay, I need to get an MBA. Most of the managers that are not an engineer or have a master's in engineering, they don't move into management. And so the only ones that I've seen successfully move into management is they've paired their engineering experience with business, and they've got an MBA, and they've been able to pull into a management level role. And that ultimately is my goal. So some of it was forward looking. That's why I say, like, in my particular role, I don't know how much it affects me outside of, I did have some strong classes that taught me to critically think, and I think and also increased my comprehension. Like, I took a law class, and you read about like Supreme Court cases and how the Supreme Court is interpreting law and how they're applying the law, and learning how they think and learning how they break problems apart, and then apply it justly and fairly for an entire nation was pretty cool. And it gave me a lot of insight on like how to go into my job and break it apart. I work with contracts a lot, and so understanding the verbiage, looking for clarity, and then working towards a common solution. But how to, they got to pull multiple justices together. In my case, I have to pull multiple orgs or like cross-functional teams together. It's like R&D, marketing, supply chain, et cetera. So in management. So, I think there's a lot of growth that can come from an MBA, but to you wanting to do it, I don't know if I'd recommend someone later in life going and getting an MBA, unless
there's maybe like a career change or something like that.
I don't know though. Like, they're pretty generic. I mean, if you have some semblance of business acumen and like a go-getter attitude, I think you can learn most of this on your own versus going to an institution and spending an arm and a leg to get an MBA.
Right.
If I was to do it over again, I would have stayed in industry probably another year, learned a few more things, and then I wouldn't have probably gone for an MBA, or at least I would have really specialized in some business area. Right now I struggle to see I struggle to see like how like later on in life my MBA will really help me get through some hurdles. I think it was strong early in life. I think it gave me some good thoughts, and it taught me how to like come into my own person. But I think when you get later in life, you have more experience. You're already kind of your own person. You got your train of thought. You got a foundation to build off of. I don't know if an MBA would be the best choice. I think a more specialized degree or certification
Right.
would be better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so on that same line, do you see a large demand for people who have your type of background, maybe just MBA aside, just the mechanical engineering background and some of the work that you do? Obviously, we know tech is a lot more popular now just because of all the different advancements and everything else. Do you still see a really large demand for that type of an employee in either your role or just in R&D in general? And maybe is there a surplus of those people as far as like maybe what your company's seen as far as hiring? Or do you think that we need to kind of beef up that pool of people in education?
I definitely think we could beef up this pool. So, this was actually one of the coolest comments I've ever received, or like pieces of feedback in my interview, was one of the R&D engineers who's now actually one of the project managers who manages multiple R&D engineers. He had said to me, he was like, as an R&D engineer, I am not supposed to be sitting in front of suppliers. I'm not supposed to be working with them. Like, my job is to build great products and spend my time there. I should not be taken away from building those products to go work with a supplier unless it's like absolutely critical. So what they loved about me was that I had a strong understanding of, or strong enough understanding in the mechanical engineering side of things to understand what the engineers were trying to do, to be able to partner with a materials engineer and go into these supplier meetings and not have to pull R&D engineers into those meetings. So you can be a strong liaison. And so you have the business interests, you know how to protect the company, you know how to architect a beautiful supply chain where you don't have supply assurance of supply concerns later on, because you're looking at the technology and you're saying, hey, this is where we're going. And, this is what we're choosing, is it going to be obsolete in 5 years, 10 years down the road? And you can protect a lot of things. You can protect R&D from having to rework their project. They absolutely despise being told that the thing that they designed is no longer acceptable and they have to go back to the drawing board and redesign it. It's quite expensive and laborsome. And then on the supplier side things too, they don't want to be committing resources to a project that, they don't think is going to get off the ground. And so I think, it is a beautiful space where if people love the energy of interacting with people love like this hero, the save the day kind of person. And then also working with a lot of different teams where you got a lot of smart people on the engineering side of things and you got a lot of smart people on the business side of things. I think it's a cool space to dip your toes in, at least when you're young, because I think it does create a fairly strong foundation and allows you to pivot in a lot of ways. I've been considered for operations roles. I know people that have left my role and gone into project management. I know people who have gone into marketing because they have a good enough understanding of what engineering does. They have a good enough understanding of what supply chain does, and they know a lot of management throughout the company just due to the exposure of supply chain. So I think young people or even people looking to make a career change, this would be a fun role to be in. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like the combination of your business education and the mechanical engineer education, those two things combined, it's giving you a much broader exposure to different positions, and it's not necessarily pigeonholing. Because I think for a long time we saw people, especially in R&D, that they're very, very specialized. And so there's just this one place for them. And then if that position becomes obsolete or that position is no longer fillable, there's really not anywhere else that you can kind of place them. With you, it sounds like you've created a little bit of insulation around yourself with that additional piece of education. That's just allowed you a lot more opportunity within the company on both sides of it and makes you an asset. And I think that's the biggest thing for people when they're looking at jobs. And because I hear all the time, it's like, oh yeah, I just want to make more money. It's like, you have to make yourself more valuable. And I think you've done that almost unintentionally. You're just like, no, I really like this and I really like this. And now it's created these other opportunities for you into the future, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought I would go in contracting or like contracts. And all of a sudden, I'm noticing our supply chain agreements. A lot of people rely on terms and conditions with a purchase order. And it's pretty lackluster, and you can get yourself into some trouble legally because you're not covering all your bases. And identified that, and all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm in contracts training, and I'm still a supply chain person, but I'm like working with legal every other day kind of thing. And so all of a sudden you're in front of a lot of eyes, and so that additional piece of education I do think helps broaden, like I said, your critical thinking, just like to be able to sit back and say, hey, I think I see something there that could be better, and then go attack it. A lot of my projects in my MBA, this is one thing I really did love, was they would ask you to take data from your job and bring it into the classroom, and then you would analyze the data, and then they would give you a package or a project they'd work on for the whole quarter. And then you could, in my case, I was able to identify like one supplier that was having consistent late shipments and was causing us some huge revenue impacts. And I was able to identify like where the delays were happening, whether it was like on the logistics side, like our own internal logistics team, was it the carrier, the freight carrier that you were using to ship the goods, or was it actually the supplier? And I was able to identify, like the days of in each segment of the process, and work to reduce those. And now, we've gone down from a 4-month lead time to like a 6 to 8 week lead time.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
That additional education component they have done a good job at making it real, and providing business impact, which then ultimately leads to bigger promotions or more I got like an equity stake, or like I got higher bonuses, stuff like that.
Awesome. And so what would you say is your favorite part about the work that you do?
So I think it teaches you how to adapt and learn quickly. It's funny because I feel like I've followed a very traditional path. Like I was an electrical commodity or mechanical commodity manager, then electrical commodity manager. Now I'm like a PCB, PCA commodity manager. But you do have to learn to adapt and react in a situation. Working on prototypes, none of them are the same. I remember being told that I was getting put on our quantum program, and I was like, "What? I've been here for like 2 months. What do you mean I'm being put on this?" And so, all of a sudden you're in these meetings and you're all learning together and you're trying to understand the industry, and then all of a sudden, like you're taking that 2-hour block of knowledge, and then you're architecting a supply chain around it, and nothing works perfectly. And it's all a mess until like the last 10%, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, we pulled it all together, and there's a bow on it, and you deliver it to production, and production loves you for it, and you're like, man, that took me 2 years of dealing with one supplier to just like it, there's 2 years of effort with like one single supplier. You compound that over many other suppliers with many other issues, and you really get great at like putting out the fires, being able to break them apart, understand like what's gating, what are you struggling with, can you bring in internal resources to help solve the problem, can you bring in other resources to solve the problem, like externally, with a supplier, do they have resources that you don't have access to? Do you have to train a supplier on how to do it correctly? We have that issue with a lot of our ASICs where the manufacturing process is messy, and so like you want to clean it up.
Right.
So I think the most exciting part is you work with a lot of smart people. You learn to adapt to a lot of situations. You learn to critically think, and at the end of the day, like you're stimulated, and then there's a career path. So that's pretty exciting too.
That's awesome. And so it sounds like there's a lot of like it's a really good culture where you are and within all of this, because there's so much teamwork required. So does that sound accurate with kind of all the work that you're doing? Because there's just so many components of the work that you're doing. It sounds probably one of the most cohesive descriptions I've heard so far of different industries, of everybody being able to work together well. And it's not like an us versus them kind of mentality.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I would say our culture is quite phenomenal. I think it really, so Keysight used to be, our oscilloscope division was originally the division that HP founded itself on. And HP grew that business and then split us off. And I would say we really kept a lot of the strong cultural values from HP into Keysight, and then moving into working with all these cross-functional teams. Yeah, I mean, my role and R&D's role are pretty critical, because if we're delaying schedules, then we might mess up marketing, right? And marketing might overhype our new product, and then all of a sudden we delay it because, you know, some component didn't get made, or like we messed up the planning of it. And, you know, we got through, you know, like the product life cycle, you know, we made it all the ways to like production, but we forgot about the ship planning. And so all of a sudden we delayed by 4 months or something like that, and marketing overhyped, and then they lose all the excitement on our product, and then you know, we release and it's a dud. You know, so it's like you got to time all these moving parts, and it is an orchestra of communication. It is pretty cool to see, and everyone is genuinely excited. Everyone wants to help. Everyone understands the goals of like, hey, we want to be first to market, we want to connect the world, we want to build really great products. This is how we do it. And nobody really wants to like let the team down, because everyone is really excited about what we're developing. And so that, I think, even if you hire someone who is maybe a little lackluster, or they don't have a lot of direction, or maybe the excitement is not all there, I think you gain that very quickly, because they're like, okay, so we're doing this thing today. And you're like, are we? They're like, yeah, we are building this today. And you're like, okay.
It's happening. We're doing it. That's awesome. Yeah. So what, you've covered the majority of the questions that I had for you. So this has been super helpful. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd want people to know, either about your educational path, your company itself? Specifically, it's like, are you guys hiring? Because it sounds like a really wonderful place to work. Sounds like you guys do some really cool stuff, or just any like kind of lasting pieces of information you want to make sure people know about you and what you do.
Yeah. So Keysight's definitely hiring. We're hiring at such a fast rate that we've run out of desks in our site. We've added a new building. We now have 3 buildings in the Colorado Springs site. And like, we're hiring so fast that we don't have like enough power that we can run through the building to like have like we were removing Keurigs from people's cubes because we were struggling to route power. So yeah, we're hiring like wildfire, and we got a lot of great positions. You know, if you're an engineer, you're a software person, you're a supply chain person, etc. Lots of opportunities. We have a beautiful culture, and I think that is probably the most important thing that I could stress is really finding a place that supports you. You know, to have a manager that like almost 100% of the time just says yes. Like, it might be a conversation, but they're always willing to be there and work with you. You know, I moved to Denver and they were like, yeah, we're not really good with this, but then they worked with me, and all of a sudden, like, we have this awesome dynamic where, you know, the company now has transitioned to this hybrid mentality. And it's like, you're here to support R&D. So as long as you're supporting R&D, we're good. And, you know, so if that means you're 4 days at home and 1 day in office 1 week, and 5 days in office another week, and 3 days in office another week, you know, they're like, okay, we're going to support you, you know, and you want to go get your MBA, go get it. You know, you want a mentorship, you know, here you go. So, you know, I've also been able to work. I've worked in like 3 or 4 countries, like just remotely, not so I'm still based in the US, but took a vacation, didn't want to spend the vacation. So I worked some. I've worked in 20 different states. I've spent, a month at home in Seattle, and then, been able to work and cover my position. So, I think a lot of life is built on like how many memories you get to have throughout the year. And that's really what like brings a lot of joy. And the fact that like, I know that I could wake up tomorrow in Seattle and complete my job and then go get to spend some time with my mom, or, go to my fiance's parents' house in Connecticut and do the same thing with them. That's pretty exciting. There, no one's like losing hair over like the little things in life. Everyone's pretty excited to be there, develop cool things. And so culture is important. I got a job offer at Amazon, and I was kind of concerned about the culture. I was like, man, I feel like I'm gonna have to work a lot of hours.
Yeah.
And it was kind of turn and burn, and like we expect you to perform in every quarter, like do better. And
right.
I was a little concerned about that. So it's like why I stuck with Keysight. And I think that also allowed me to explore, like the culture allowed me to explore a lot of different paths, contracts, commodity management, supply chain program management. I've even had some forays into like, being tutored by marketing. So, lots of experiences. You got a lot of sites to pick from too. We're an international company. You can work. My mentor, I have a VP who's mentoring me. He's based out of Belgium.
Very cool.
So, a lot of influence that comes through, and people stick at the company. I mean, a lot of people are from the HP days, so they're there for 40 years. And so a lot of knowledge that gets passed down to its younger generation and carrying it through. So, people get up to speed pretty quick, and I would say on average are high performing. So, that'd be probably the lasting thing I would say. It's just, if you're a new person coming into the industry, or you're looking for a company, do your due diligence, find a good culture fit, good alignment.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Very, very cool. I really appreciate your time today. This is incredibly informative and helpful. We'll make sure to link Keysight and your guys' hiring page, since we know that you guys are wanting to bring in some more people. So that way, if somebody is interested after what you had to say, then they can definitely reach out and apply. But thank you again for your time. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline.
Absolutely. Thank